time now to take a look at all the international papers with our press reviewer, Elena Casas. Hello, Elena. Now, we were just talking a little earlier in the bulletin about Libya, where anti-Gaddafi troops are still trying to capture the last strongholds of support for him. And you've got something in The Guardian where they're talking about fresh revelations about the West came to be involved in that conflict, and that's on their front page.
Yes, morning again, Claire. I haven't had my Guardian delivered this morning, unfortunately, but hopefully we can have a look at it at the digital edition. Their headline is How Cameron Swept Aside the Libya Sceptics, and the paper claims that even though it was France who led the calls for a no-fly zone back in February, it was British Prime Minister David Cameron who actually persuaded them to take part in big bombing campaigns, especially that one in the west of Libya, which allowed Libyan anti-Gaddafi troops coming from Libya's western mountains to get into Tripoli. They also say he did this against the advice of his own cabinet and of British Security Services MI6, who apparently told him it would be better to stick with the devil he knew. But the Prime Minister apparently was terrified that if there was a massacre along the scale of Srebrenica in 1995, for example, then it would destroy his international reputation forever, really, his career. If we look in here in the Wall Street Journal, they've got another interesting story about Libya here. An exiled Libyan Jew who's returned to open Tripoli's only synagogue. Now, there aren't necessarily many worshippers to worship in it because of the 40,000 Libyan Jews that there were back at the end of the Second World War. The paper says most left for Israel during the 50s and 60s to escape persecution, but one of them has come back, a guy called David Gerby. He's reconstructing Tripoli's only synagogue, and he says he's getting quite a lot of support there from Islamist groups and even from imams, Muslim clerics, who have been helping him move all the rubble out and start reconstructing this old synagogue. So he says that's a good symbol of what's changed in Libya.
And now going back to where the Arab Spring all began, Egypt, you're taking a look at a story on that.
Yes, this is from the online Arabic newspaper Aram. Now, it's focused on a case that's attracted a huge amount of attention around the Arab world and on Twitter. This is an Egyptian blogger called Michael Nabil. Now, he's been arrested for insulting the military regime and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Now, he's now on a hunger strike to protest against that sentence. He's been on it for 41 days, so his health is already quite deteriorated and his kidneys are failing, the paper says. And he's waiting for the verdict of an appeal that's due on Tuesday. And he says if he's not freed then, he'll also start refusing water as well as food. Now, his case has become quite symbolic in Egypt, a country where a lot of people are worried about their revolution being betrayed by the military government that's in charge, and lots of people saying they show signs of being almost as authoritarian as Mubarak ever was. So this case has generated a lot of support there.
Now, from Egypt, what some activists have called the Tahrir Square on the Hudson, and what has the US media made of all of that then, these protests on Wall Street, the arrest of 700 people?
Well, there's an interesting article in the Huffington Post. Let's have a look at that. They say that police in the US have got completely the wrong end of the stick on the Occupy Wall Street protests. They say they've arrested people because they thought they were just students looking to cause trouble, whereas actually the Occupy Wall Street movement could be one of the most politically transformative political moments in 21st century American politics. They say that corporate interests have just got too much power on both the right and the left in US politics, and this actually, it might look like a leftist issue trying to clear out corporate interests from politics, but the writer says it's something that can help the left of politics to find common cause with the Tea Party, who are also upset about a few wealthy donors having too much control over the Republican Party. Apparently, according to a recent poll, 85% of Democrat voters and 76% of Republicans, so a big majority on both sides, say that political campaign funding needs to be reformed in the US because some powerful people, especially bankers, have too much power. And so he says the Occupy Wall Street movement could trigger a change in US democracy.
Now, another story that we covered in the bulletin, Amanda Knox, she's due in court to hear the verdict in her appeal today. Italian papers saying that perhaps we're paying a little too much attention, though, to this story.
Yes, La Repubblica says it should be impossible for any juror to come up with a neutral verdict in a story that's had so much partisan media attention. They say over 400 foreign journalists have been accredited to go to this verdict announcement later today.
400.
Which is an awful lot, really. And it's interesting, actually, how partisan the media coverage of this particular case has been over in the US. They've very much portrayed Amanda Knox as being completely innocent from the very beginning. Whereas in Britain, where the victim Meredith Kercher came from, they've been much more negative, the British tabloids, about Knox. La Repubblica says that US TV networks have even paid for a private plane to take her straight back to the US for that all-important first interview if she is released later today. So with this amount of partisan coverage, they say you just can't expect the jury to be neutral.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Elena Casas. That was our look at the international newspapers.